All right, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of the Bulletproof Dental Practice Podcast. Today we have Dr. David Phelps on with us today. And David, your podcast is the Freedom Founders podcast, correct?
It's actually the Dentist Freedom Blueprint podcast. So
Dentist
you're
Freedom
close.
Blueprint.
You're close, Greg. Yeah.
Okay. But you're the founder of the Freedom Founders, right?
Correct. That's
okay.
Correct.
All right. Let me give a little bio because like I was saying before we kind of hit record that I really want to get this to be some of the context for some of the things we talk about. So David Phelps began investing in real estate while he was still in dental school in 1980. His first joint venture partner was his father, whom David convinced to be the financial partner in a rental property that David managed during his professional training at Baylor College of Dentistry in Dallas. After graduating dental school in 1983, he never looked back and began a steady and continuous progression in real estate education and investment for the remainder of his practice career. In 2004, David's then 12-year-old daughter was diagnosed with end-stage liver failure. The result, years of chemotherapy and drug therapy to treat leukemia and epileptic seizures. Jenna was fortunate to receive a liver transplant in time to save her life. However, the recovery period was long and arduous, and it was during this time period that David made the decision to run his dental practice as a true business entrepreneur and transform the business to enable him to spend more time with his daughter. So like we alluded to earlier, you've founded, the Freedom Founders is it just for dentists, David?
I speak mainly just to dentists, Peter, because that's who I am, right? But
Right.
we have affiliated healthcare professionals. We've got some MDs, some veterinarians, chiropractors, optometrists, but primarily we're 95% dentists.
Okay.
Yes, orthodontists.
And so
yeah.
that's a mastermind community. Is that right?
It is. Yeah, we meet quarterly. We do a lot of education and connecting the dots in between our meetings to really help on the pathway to freedom. We do a lot in real estate investing, of course, but there's other pieces too. Stuff that mindset and I'm not a practice management guy, but I've been there in practice, and so I try to bring really good people, good content to help with that part of it too, because I think freedom is what I'm all about. Consists of different components, and you can't totally ignore one for the other. You can't say, let's go run and do real estate and kind of forget the practice. I always say you start with your most important, most valuable asset, which is your practice. It's your license, your expertise. You've got to start there. If you haven't optimized that, you have no business running out and trying to invest in anything else, whether it's real estate or cryptocurrency, you name it. Focus is the key.
Well, a lot of times I'm a big, I consume a lot of the podcasts, not so much all dental, but sometimes you look at people that are producing podcasts, you wonder if they have the chops to kind of be promoting that content. Right. And so, before Craig said, hey, we need to get David Phelps on here. I was actually like, heck yeah, because I, am a big fan of your podcast. And I think you deliver a lot of value and a lot of tips that I've applied in my real estate acquisitions and such. So, so I'm excited to have you on, and I want to dive into a couple things with you, if that's cool.
You bet. Let's do it.
Okay.
Yeah, I also want to say something, Peter, too, is, Peter's been actively involved in real estate for some time. He's got a bunch of commercial buildings that are income producing. I don't really have a lot of real estate outside of my dental office. So my perspective on how you occur and what value you bring is different, but I wanted to corroborate what Peter's saying, because just even your on the fly comments that you make, David, where you're just kind of talking about vision and mastery and freedom and time, it's inspirational, and I've benefited greatly from it. I remember you do these monologues where you're basically on the beach, or wherever you are, telling your tip of the day. And you were giving one about being a master marketer, and that how when you had sold your practice, you had to take it back, but it had been all but destroyed. And that the number one value that you can bring as the practice owner is a marketing position. And that really was a wake-up call for me, because sometimes we get pulled in, and Peter and I have very opposite talents. And one of them, I just love being in the chair. I love it. So and Peter's like, he loves building the business. And I guess both are valuable for building the business, but it was really important that I heard that day. And I want to thank you for that if you focus on the marketing, that's your full goal, that that can be just as valuable, if not 10 times more valuable than actually practicing. So.
Well, it can, and I think you said it well. We each find the areas that we really are passionate about, where our genius zone is, and I never tell people, don't do what you don't love. If you love being in the chair, then focus on that, but surround yourself with the other people who can bring the other pieces, the components to the business, the marketing, the staff, the HR, whatever it is you need to do, so you can focus on that. The problem is, as we all know, is that we weren't built that way going through school. It was all on us. We were taught to be the best dentists, the best clinicians we can. We could take a ton of CE to be, provide the best treatment, but that's not scalable unless you learn to build out the rest. And again, it all depends upon what your individual definition of success or freedom is, and that's going to be different for everybody. I never try to impart what I believe in other people. I just want them to think about being very specific, very intentional about how they see their life, and make sure that their business, their practice, is actually allowing them to live their vision of life. And way too many of us, and I'm right in that bunch for many years until I got the wake up calls. I was doing the same thing. I was working hard, as quote successful practice but only by certain definitions. And one was, financially I was doing pretty well. I had security for my family, but the other elements of freedom that I talk about today, they weren't there for me. They weren't there. And I think a lot of people think, well, if I just work hard and invest or save or however I want to do that someday I'll reach that point where I can start living my life. And I tell people to stop doing that, because someday, really, for most people, it doesn't ever come.
Yeah, I think that's a wake up call for a lot of us. It was for me a long time back in my career, and I thought, I was like, man, I got hurt. Actually, I had a motorcycle accident, and I thought to myself, like, well, and everything came to a screeching halt. And I said, well, I don't really have a business. I have kind of a great job, and it was a great job, but it wasn't a business. And so that's been my quest. And maybe, Greg, you alluded to the fact that I like the quest of building the business. And I do, I love the marketing, and I love the growth. I love the creation. I love all that. But a lot of it has been, a self-fulfilling need, because I really wanted to create something bigger than, that wasn't predicated on what Peter Bolden did with his two hands.
Yeah. And I'll say this too, is that, life circumstances, oftentimes that adversity that you go through, like Peter, you're talking about a health issue. Another person who had the same thing, you guys know, my good friend Scott Luna, right down in San Antonio, back problem, right? He had to do the same thing. He had to recreate really who he was, not so much thinking, well, I'm going to be the great clinician and provide the treatment because my body's not going to let me, or it could be other circumstances that don't allow you to do what you thought you were going to do from the outset. Learning to have skill sets that I call are transferable. So doing dentistry, being really awesome at dentistry is great as long as you can do it. But again, what if something happens where you can't do it? Do you have other transferable skill sets that you could move or morph into something else? Most of us don't. I was just fortunate that I got involved in real estate really early, in my first year at dental school, and I didn't think about it being a plan B. I just saw it as a way to be a good steward of when I finally started making some money, I could invest it well. But it turned out that learning the attributes of real estate provided an education for me that, I couldn't have gotten it with an MBA in business or marketing or real estate had I gone that route. It taught me so many other skill sets that when it was time for me to leave clinical practice because of my daughter's situation, I had another place to go. Now, it didn't happen automatically. I didn't quickly have a vision of, okay, here's where I'll go. But because I had built that other foundation for myself over those years, it really provided a basis where I could move into something else that I love today. I love it a lot.
You had kind of it sounds to me like you've always had a side hustle other than dentistry, and that side hustle then grew to be something, self-sustaining, right? Is that kind of accurate or?
Yeah, it did. And as I said, it wasn't set out that way from the beginning. It was just mainly I need to learn how to invest, right, the money I had, right, do it the way I thought was the best way. That's why I studied it. But it wasn't until later I realized that with real estate, I learned a ton about finance and contract law and negotiations.
Yep. A lot of hard, expensive lessons, I'm sure too, right? That taught you.
Exactly, and all that education, could be applied in so many other places in life, where I've had to sometimes work out of some sticky situations instead of having to rely 100% on other people where you need them, like attorneys or financial people. I feel like I'm at a point in my life where I can orchestrate those other people. And I think that's the key is don't rely completely, but orchestrate whatever it is you're trying to do. You need to be aware enough, whether it's marketing or your business or your practice, finance, whatever it is, to at least orchestrate what you want. If you just totally abdicate to other people, then you kind of get what you get, and that's not usually a good way to go.
So David, Craig and I have this running joke with, I don't know how many times we've talked about it on the podcast, but we do talk about it in person, is that the second the dentist starts having, a fair amount of discretionary income, it goes to something outside of the lane in which they created that income, right? So like Craig's joke is, hey, I've been really successful as a dentist. I'm going to open a Subway store. Like that sounds like a great idea, right?
Right.
So, but that, given that what I just said, like, honestly, and I know you talk about real estate, right? And I don't know if you talk about just residential or commercial. I've never been that deep into kind of some of the things you teach, but obviously, again, it's not the same. It's not the lane in which we really live, right? And so I want to know how you get around that when you're talking to people who, if real estate isn't in their wheelhouse, but it's what you're preaching to get people out into freedom, kind of, so to speak.
Yeah, well, I tell people, the doctors, dentists that I talk to today, in terms of using real estate, I don't want them to do it the way I did it. The way I did it was, I was really young, right? And I had more time than money back then. But I'll also say, I'll be very up front and say that, like all of us, I'm a type A, I'm a driver. So when I pick something to try to become good at, dentistry, all right, just like all of us, you just, it's pedal to the metal. I'm going to be the best I can be. I did that. I picked one other thing, and that was real estate. And I worked really hard on both of those in tandem. Now that did cause some imbalance in my life, and I'm not saying it was perfect. On the other hand, because I focused so hard on the real estate, I became very good at it. Probably as good at real estate, or even better than I was in dentistry. So what I would tell people today, picking another lane, you're right. You've got to be careful. How deep do you want to get in it? I say, if you want to pick other lanes to be involved in or diversify your investments or your businesses, then you need to first pick the right people. You first need to pick the right people. Okay. That could lead you to the next lane. If you try to find a lane by yourself and say, oh, that looks interesting, like you said, of Subway, Sonics, whatever, whatever franchises, you pick the wrong lane like that, you're not going to know what the ins and outs are. I love to joint venture with other people. I love strategic alliances. That's how I invest in real estate today. Not how I did it back when I was first getting started and going out and finding the properties and involving myself with orchestrating contractors and managing tenants. I learned all that from the ground up, just like being in the mailroom. And when I was young, that wasn't a bad thing. Today, I would not tell any other dentist to do that unless you're flat out retired or you've got some entrepreneurial kids that are old enough to run that kind of a business, because full-time investing in real estate really is a business if you're going to be boots on the ground. And a dentist does not need to be boots on the ground. You need to find other people that are boots on the ground and learn how to form strategic alliances. I'm not talking about partnerships here. That's a different ballgame altogether. But strategic alliances can be done very well in real estate, where one person can be, the managing joint venture person, and the other partner can be, again, I'm using partner in a different format here, but can be the person who is more passive. But you still can exert control, whether you're investing in equities or in what the other side, which is debt lending. I'm not trying to go down rabbit holes here, but just giving you context for that great question you asked. So yeah, pick another lane, but have other people. The who is more important than the what, in my opinion.
Okay.
What's interesting is, as you're talking about, I had a small epiphany. Everybody in their own business, the grass is always greener in most things in life. And there's no exception to the business world. Everybody, it seems like most people just don't like the business they're in. So it's like everybody has this concept of like getting the business to perform optimally so they can sell it or exit it. But the funny thing is, if you get your business optimal where it's performing for you, you don't wish to sell it.
Right.
So it's like everybody's talking about passive income all day and freedom, when in actuality, the dental practice could be a wonderful source of passive income with a return that could really beat real estate or the ice cream shop or the Subway that you want to do. It's just, people think it's just easier. It might just be easier if I did an ice cream store. It would be easier if I had a multi-unit residential complex. But they don't ever want to reinvest where they are. It just seems like, it's like going through a bad relationship. It seems like it might just be easier to get a divorce and start over, when sometimes it's not always that easy.
But I think we hear that so much in dentistry is because we're so used to being the, you know,
the instrument of the work, the technician and the owner.
Doing how much can I do with my hands equals how much my business does, right? And so I think when you dream of the Subway shop or the ice cream shop, you know that you're not going to be scooping the ice cream. So that sounds like a great idea, right? Like, I don't know. I'm just kind of, Craig, I'm just kind of going on our joke that we always talk about. But as I'm hearing you talk, I think that might be some of what's going on.
Well, let's take real estate, for example. I mean, the idea in real estate is, maybe you want to buy a multi-unit residential complex, 10 or 15 units. You don't think of yourself unclogging the toilet at 2 a.m. on a Saturday, so there's this idea that if you're going to do a business, you're going to hire their people and put them in their highest best use. But in our dental practice, we think of us as the ones that only care or whatever. So we apply principles of leadership, delegation, and training into the new venture, but maybe not necessarily turn that focus into our own practices. It's just a subtle distinction in the way most dentists think about their business. They don't think of it as a business, or that it has a potential to actually be a business. And by a business, we can all agree that a business produces both time and money. If it only produces money for you and you have to spend more time, it's not really a business, it's a job. But most dentists feel trapped because they believe their practices are a job.
Yeah, no, you're 100% right. That's how we were trained. That we, in fact, I don't think, gentlemen, that the word business was ever used when I was going through school. I don't know if it's changed in 30 years, but it was always a practice, and this practice was some ethereal term that was not a business, that you showed up in your white coat and somehow you didn't have to really be a business person. Things just happened. That's obviously so outdated and so outmoded. You can't even touch that today. So yeah, you're right. There's a dichotomy between what we are as dentists and what we've been trained to be, and thinking about what a real business is. There's no question, Craig, that investing in a true business, and ideally one that you're involved in, right, as the owner, that's the best ROI, period. The best return on investment will always come from optimizing a business, if it's a true business. Once you have a business or businesses optimized, and then you're looking for additional diversification, that's where I say I think real estate, this is my biased opinion, of course, is the best asset class to do that outside of that business. But yeah, don't be misguided here and think that the grass is always greener, and if you just drop what you're doing here or you don't pay attention to it, that you can make it up over here in another lane. That's not going to happen.
Yeah,
well, David, sorry, Craig, go ahead, bud.
No. I was just going to say that Peter and I always talk about that real wealth, and I'm sure you could speak to this even more factually than we can, but in our experience, it's anecdotal, but real wealth is always brought about by real estate, most commonly, because you're leveraging your asset, and there's capital appreciation, there's depreciation. It's just the way our society, our system works. It's very favorable to building massive wealth through real estate. So we all agree upon that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, real estate has so many preferences to it. What makes it difficult is that it's not an efficient market. You can't just call up a broker. You can't go on and trade online. Real estate doesn't work that way, right? So it's more difficult, but that difficulty is where the opportunities are. So there's that disconnect, right? And again, you can do it the hard way, you can do it the easy way. But yeah, typically people that have wealth have some amount of real estate in their portfolio. Yes, I think that's probably true.
So can I ask you a personal question, David? Are you in the stock market at all?
I'm not. I'm not at all. I'll tell you, my wife was in finance major, MBA in finance, and she was in an institutional stock broker from, for 15 years. So that would have put it like 1993 to about 2007. She was an institutional stockbroker, so she understands that world very, very well. I got completely out. I did invest in the stock market some, to a limited degree, just because, again, I'm thinking, like I tell everybody, diversify, right? So up until probably about 2005, I got out. She quit and left her partnership in 2007. Not that it was not so much fun for her anymore, because all the regulation had just taken all the fun out of it. And so we're both completely out.
But I figured as much. That's why I was asking you that question.
Yeah, and I have to be careful. I have to be careful, because I can come on too strong. And I realize that sometimes by knocking the stock market too hard, so I try to be a little more careful today and say, look, wherever you are, just have some amount of control or understand what it is, and maybe think about diversifying in some other areas when the right time for you. But yeah, I'm not in it at all.
So one of my good buddies, Garrett Gunderson, when he talks about diversification, he says diversification is really just an acknowledgement that you're not confident in any which way you're going.
Yeah, I know. I've heard Garrett and I are good friends too. I'm in a mastermind with Garrett, so I definitely appreciate Garrett's wisdom
and that was a wake up call. And he was the one who actually got me. He's like, why would you invest in a stock market that, and I can say this because I'm not an advisor, Dave, but he was like, why would you invest in something that you have zero control over? You don't know what the tax rate is. You probably don't know the fund manager's name. And here you go, you're resting your entire future on all these questions. And I was like, oh, this sounds terrible. He was like, be in control of your own destiny, right? And I was like, and so that was a wake-up call for me a long time ago, which, Craig, back to what you were saying, that was the real estate and the kind of the building and this and that, because, I realized that if I wasn't in control, that, either I had no one else to blame, you know what I mean? Or if I was in control, right? So, Garrett's been a big influence in my quote-unquote financial freedom, so to speak.
Garrett's got a lot of wisdom. He certainly does.
He does. It's funny. I saw Garrett in the airport one day, just randomly, and my wife was with me, and she said, "Wait, he's a dentist? He doesn't look like, because he had his long hair. He's fit.
He looks like Jesus.
He's like, he's like." And my wife was like, wow, all your other dental friends. And I was like, babe, he's not a dentist. Like, but she was smitten with Garrett. That's for sure.
I'm trying to find this dude right now. Yeah. I don't know. I'm looking him up right now. I'm looking for images.
So we digressed a little bit. So David, question, residential or commercial?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of residential. Outside of commercial, I think works well. If you have your own business, dental practice, and I had that as well until I sold it off. But I think for people outside of their own business or practice, single family is really, really safe. Now, trust me, people can make money in commercial, and so just like stock market, I wouldn't say don't touch it, but let's think about it. With commercial, who are you dealing with? You're dealing with people that are a lot more sophisticated than the average, relatively new novice to real estate trying to figure it out. With single family, you have two exit strategies. You can always sell to homeowners when it's time to exit, and then obviously to investors. With commercial, you're only going to sell to investors that are looking for internal rates of return, cash on cash cap rates. Single family is going to be evaluated differently. Also, I like single family because I look at single family as if it were horizontal apartments. You take a multifamily, you tip it over, and all the units and all the doors spill out over a large geographic area. Well, those are my houses. Okay, the downside, people would say, well, yeah, but what about management? You can't have centralized management with single family houses. Well, I don't need centralized management because I either do work through joint venture partners, or I use a concept called lease options, which is a management tool in single family that works very effectively to reduce management. So most all of the objections that people can bring about single family, I can overcome those. Not to say that I
petrified me, honestly.
Has it?
I think the myth to me, and I'm not an advanced real estate investor by any means. I mean, I guess I have a commercial space, but the whole, like, I did actually have a condo that I couldn't sell, and I think my experience with that was like, hey, Doc, I got a light bulb out over here. Can you come over? And I'd be like, get home from work and go put the light bulb in. I was like, this is terrible. And I think that was the way I thought investing in residential real estate was going to be, is just a complete pain in the ass. And so I've always been averse to residential investment, but now I've kind of been opening my eyes to it a little bit more, that there's obviously some deals. But that being said, the market, as we all know, is super hot. It's a seller's market. So what would you say to that? If I said, oh, it's too hot right now, things are at an all-time high, it's not the right time to invest, what would you, David Phelps, say to that?
I would agree that one needs to be very careful. A lot of people, as we both know, whether it's Wall Street or real estate, the euphoria of a hot market, a bull market, people get in a lot of times late. In real estate, I see that in every cycle. Same thing was happening back 10 years ago, 13 years ago, 2005, 6, and 7. When your Uber driver or your taxi driver is talking about flipping houses on the side,
Right.
outside their job. That's when you got to be really, really
out.
careful. It's
Yeah.
well, it's time to get out, or time not to be speculating. There's a difference between investing and speculating. And a lot of people in a hot market, they're speculating. They don't know the fundamentals. They're buying to make quick flips and quick profits. That always runs out when the market tops out. I buy for long term. Long term for me is typically 10 years or more. I've got houses today that I bought back in the early 80s. I've had over 30 years that's just been cash flow producers. When the market, and I've gone through four downturns over that 37, 38 years. When the market turns down and real estate loses value, and remember too that real estate is not a national index. It's localized. So
Right.
there's some markets are more volatile than others. So you've got to understand what market you're investing in. But the markets I invest in are the non-volatile. I'll call them the boring markets because they just produce cash flow like crazy. When 2008, 9, 10 hit, I think my values probably went down no more than 20%, probably 15 to 20%.
Really?
But here's why I didn't care, Peter and Craig, because a house doesn't know when it loses value. See, people don't run for the hills. They don't not need shelter. Certainly, some people may need to ratchet down, but in the houses that I recommend investing in, there's always people that will rent those houses. So I didn't have people leaving the houses; they weren't vacant. I had to stabilize my rents for about 18 months. Right, I wasn't jacking rents up, but since that time they've just gone up. Now property values are back up again. So for me, with single family, it doesn't matter if we have volatility, as long as I'm buying or investing for the long term. If I'm speculating, that's another ball game, and that's an arbitrage in markets where you do come in when the market's cratered, and you can go to Las Vegas, you can go to parts of Florida when the market was down and ride it back up. But that's more of a business. Now, what I'll do is I'll joint venture with people that do that. So the way we find good deals today is it's just like we talked about earlier. Craig was talking about marketing. It's all lead generation. The people that find the good deals are lead generating like crazy. They've got a network. They're doing direct mail. They're doing pay-per-click, Google AdWords. Finding those needles in the haystack. They're tougher to find today, but they're still there.
Okay.
People that don't know the difference between wholesale and retail, and they think, well, yeah, I need to go out and buy some real estate. They're going to call their local Rotary Club real estate broker agent, good person, right? Good person in the market, and say, hey, John or Judy, I like getting this real estate thing. It sounds hot, and John or Judy are going to do their best to help it. They don't lead generate like I'm talking about. They go to the MLS, multiple listing service. It's retail today, so you're going to buy retail, and you don't have the bandwidth to scale up the contracting to do the rehabs efficiently. So you pay too much, and then as you said, Peter, now I've got to manage this house. I don't know how to manage property. I'm a good guy. I'm a dentist. I love for people to love me. So I'll run to the beck and call and change the light bulb.
Right.
It's just it's the wrong way to go about it. So your experience with that condo is true to form. It's just that's not the way I would tell you to do it. Okay. So hope that helps.
No, that answers all my questions, actually.
What's funny, Peter, is I live in South Florida, and we were making the headlines back in 2008 and 9 because there was the headlines were saying, I'm sorry?
Miami, like you could buy.
Yeah, well, even my area.
Yeah.
But there was this. Miami has a inventory of 20. It's going to take 20 years. What they said in 2009 and 10 and 11. It's going to take 20 years for the inventory of Miami to be absorbed. There was so much overbuilding. Meanwhile, 36 months later, the cranes are flying, everything's sold out, and values are way past what the highest they ever were pre-bubble. So I think what you spoke to, David, where you're trying to make that arbitrage, you're trying to time it just right. I mean, how can, if you're trying to time the stock market or trying to pop in and pop out of the real estate market, that's really just at best case scenario, you're doing you're gambling. But what you're talking about, we have income producing properties. My buddy Michael, he's in commercial real estate. He is always, 35, 40% LTV. Am I saying that correctly? Where he's got 40% of the value in the property. So he's always, fairly, he has a good amount of equity in there. And when winter comes, which you all know, the season's winter is coming, he actually takes it as a buying opportunity. And he was frankly embarrassed to tell people he was in real estate in 2008 and 9 because he'd meet his babysitter, and the babysitter's like, yeah, I used to be a bartender and now I'm in real estate. What do you do? He's like, I kind of do development. Like he was ashamed of it. It's
Right.
like, so there's many different layers. And like you said, if you don't know what you're doing and you go to your Rotary Club or Chamber of Commerce real estate person, you're going to get shafted, and you really need to know what you're doing. And I was fortunate enough to be able to hook on a Michael. I think I told you that, David, but he finally let me in a deal. He never really wanted to. He's like, listen, I don't need your money. No offense. I got more than you'll ever have, and I don't want to lose a friendship. But finally, he did one for me, and I jumped in with him. But I've watched him over 20 years, go into a shopping center that was $2 million, put 30% down, refinance or release a couple of tenants and have it appraised at $4 million, pull the equity out, and then 15 years later sell it for $20 million. Meanwhile, the thing pull off $900,000 free and clear of cash flow for him, pays less taxes than I do, and I make a fraction of what he makes. Do 1035 exchanges. It's amazing. I mean, I've scratched the surface of understanding the power of real estate. I don't claim to know anything with no training. I just watched and been an observer to friends go through it. And they're all kicking such ass that if you could bring that to dentistry, if you could provide an easy formula for guys like us or Peter to jump into, what a value, what a massive value.
Well, go back to what I said earlier. It's to be involved in another lane, which is what we're talking about here for dentists into real estate. It really is more the who than the what. Yeah, you can find all kinds of sexy stories, anecdotal out there of people that made money. You can find just as many people that lost money that know what they're doing, right? But typically people don't talk about those. Really, truly, it's about aligning yourself, as you did, with somebody that you knew, you trusted. You built an organic relationship that wasn't based on someone trying to sell you something or raise capital on your back. Someone who actually didn't even want to let you do it. I mean, that's really what you're looking for. People ask me, well, David, how do you find your deals? How do you do it? You guys sort of alluded to that. Peter did. Especially in an up market like this, where deals are not just out there to pick off the trees like we could 5 and 6 years ago after the downturn. And I tell them it's all about the network. But I spent 38 years developing that network, and I continue to do so today to find the right people, because I can't do it all myself. I diversify my investments in real estate through other people, through their businesses, through their ventures, and it's just learning about the structures. The other thing I'll say too, guys, is that financing. Financing is everything, and there's different ways to finance real estate. Typically, people think, well, the only way to finance real estate is you go to the bank. And yeah, for commercial properties, multifamily, larger projects, the bank is the way to go, because today you can leverage, at 5% or maybe 5.5% or 6%, depending upon the project, long-term 30-year fixed-rate financing on cash flow producing assets such as real estate. That's killer. You're locking in, and you're having the government subsidize those low interest rates for as long as 30 years. If you hold that property for 30 years or 10 or 15 or 20, realize as we have inflation, which I believe we'll have in coming years, I believe we've got to have some inflation, that's a devaluation of the dollar. Well, when you're now paying back debt, fixed rate debt with a devalued dollar, you're shorting the dollar. I know a lot of people talk about, well, I don't want to go into debt. Dave Ramsey talks about not going into debt. And I have to say, well, look, there's a difference here, folks. Dave Ramsey is an awesome leader, and he helps the masses who can't balance a checkbook. He helps the people who just don't know one-on-one finance, right? And who rack up credit card consumption living. He's totally right, and he can't speak out of both sides of his mouth, otherwise he'll confuse his audience. So I say, look, what you've got to realize is that there is good debt and bad debt, and Dave Ramsey is all about the bad debt. If you learn how to use good debt, look, we wouldn't have our businesses, our practices, our buildings, would we, if we didn't use debt? I mean, I don't think you guys.
Peter would.
Oh, Peter's a massive saver.
Peter subscribes to the Archie Bunker mentality of debt.
There you go.
I hear you, and I think it's such an important thing that you just touched on. Good and bad debt, man. Keep going. I'm sorry, I just had to tell you, Peter's not a debt guy.
Well, that's not true per se, but
come on, bro.
Talk to me, David. Talk to me about. I've had this conversation with Mark Costas, actually, and
sure.
So when the financial institutions, when you go to the bank and you're up against your limit, your personal borrowing limits, even though you have the 20% down, they get nervous when they start looking at the total allocation. So what are some options when you do start bumping up against that?
So I started down that track, and I said the most common place for people to go to build businesses, practices, invest in real estate is to use financing.
Right.
The secret for me is I've rarely used institutional financing. I've used it maybe 4 times over 37 years. So how do I do it? Well, I use a lot of private capital, and I've used a lot of seller financing. Private capital is a great way to invest in real estate, and you can use debt financing or equity financing. And I don't want to go too deep here, but
sorry,
yeah,
isn't private capital super expensive though?
It doesn't have to be.
No?
Because you can structure. Well, there's different risk factors, and let's just break it down. There's private capital, and I invest this way. I'm a lender in a lot of deals. So short-term deals, which are typically called quick turns or fix and flips. And we'll just look at single family. You can do it in any asset class. But let's say single family, you've got a boots on the ground business person in real estate who lead generates, buys great deals wholesale, and he's got the team. He goes in, fixes them up, flips them, and puts them back on the marketplace and sells them retail, makes a profit. Those typically you get 12, 13, 14, 15% on your money. Now that's expensive to that borrower, but it's not really. Here's why: because they're buying so cheap wholesale that they're making enough profit that short-term borrowing, that short-term money, typically 6 months on average. Some of the deals I'm doing today, that money's coming back in 3 months. I mean, 3 months, maybe 9 months on the top side, but I'm getting 12, 13, 14, 15% on my money on those deals. They don't mind doing it because why? They have quick access to capital, and that's what allows them to do their business. They can't go to the bank for the reasons you just suggested. Even if they use lines of credit, the bank's gonna hold them back at a certain point. These people I'm talking about are doing 200, 250, 300 turns a year. I mean, we're talking of massive scale businesses of people that are really, really good. So that's one way. Now, longer term lending, if I'm lending on their portfolio, buy and hold, no, there's no way they could afford to cash flow a property at anything even close to 10%. Typically, I'll lend money at 4, 5, or 6%. And then you say, well, then what's next, Dave? Because that's kind of cheap for you, isn't it? I go, I'll take a back-end participation. A back-end participation is shared equity participation. I know what they're buying it. I know what their equity position is going in. Craig, you talked about loan to value. So if I know that they're going in with at least a 30% equity position today, and I know that in the marketplace with inflation, that'll increase, then I'll take the rest of my return on the back end 5 years, 10 years down the road when the property sells. I'll go in and let them borrow the money from me at 4 or 6% so they cash flow the property because I want them safe. I want them to be able to run that thing. They deal with all the contractors and the people and the tenants. I don't do any of that. And so I've got this, I tell people that the most profitable seat at the table, and I'm talking about not the food table, I'm talking about the closing table. My opinion, the most profitable seat is the lender's seat. No wonder the banks have the big buildings. They figured it out. We can do the same thing because there's a void in the marketplace. See, the banks participate in different levels of financing, across the capital arena. And in houses or commercial real estate, they'll participate at a certain level, but there's a void there where they won't participate, and entrepreneurs like us, we fill that void. And if you do it the right way with the right people, the right structures, there's room for lots of opportunity in real estate. But it comes down again to who you know. Don't try to do it yourself.
Yeah, that's good. That's interesting.
Yeah, it's good to be the bank. It's good to be the bank.
It is, and also the equity financing, which means it's equity financing is more like a joint venture rather than a debt financing. Debt financing has a contract, a promissory note that has a stated interest rate on it. That's what we typically know. When we go to the bank, there's a stated interest rate. You're going to pay it back over this term. Here's your monthly payments, blah, blah, blah. It amortizes, or maybe it doesn't amortize, whatever it is. With equity financing, and again, you're not going to do this with a bank. You do it with private lender. But I'll do equity financing. Now, equity financing means that you and the borrower are really on a little bit more even terms. So when you're sharing, it can be a 50-50. It doesn't have to be 50-50. It can depend upon who's providing what into the deal. But let's just say it's a 50-50. So on all net cash flow, you share 50-50. On exit, on equity on the end, you share 50-50. If the market takes a little bit of a dive, and maybe in a certain market the rents have to be lowered short term during that down cycle, the borrower doesn't eat the whole thing. He eats a little bit of that with the equity partner. So equity financing is a fun way to look at maybe sometimes a little bit more risky elements when you have a lender who has experience and says, you know what, I'll play ball with you in that market. I understand what you're doing. Yes, the bank's not going to lend you, but I'll lend the money because I'll play because I think there's a bigger upside. Could there be a downside? Yeah. So there's a little bit more speculation there. It's not for the novice to do, but I'm telling you, that's how deals are made in this country. That's capitalism all the way, where people come together, put deals together based on full information and expectations and looking at risk and reward. That's how it's done.
So David, if you had $100,000 and you bought you bought a condo or a single primary residence, let's just call it $100,000. What would you expect? And you own that thing free and clear. What would you expect as a return annually?
Yeah, great. Yeah, great. In the marketplace today, I'm looking at 8% cap rate. So 8%. So a cap rate, a capitalization rate, means if I'm looking at 8% is my target. That means if I put $100,000 into a property, it's free and clear. So we don't put any financing into this. There's no leverage. It's just all. I have 100% free and clear property, $100,000. I'm going to get 8% net of all costs, all management, property taxes, insurance, vacancy, turnover. That's what I want as my target return going in today. 8%. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
8%. That's my target. Now if I can beat that, so be it. But I also remember I'm looking for other redeeming factors that'll increase my return. Obviously, I want to look at buying in and capturing some equity on the front end. So again, finding a good deal with somebody who finds good deals, getting some equity on the front end. Now, the equity on the front end, meaning if we're buying it at a 30% discount to market, that equity by itself is not going to return more than my 8%. That will return on the back end. But 8% cap rate means you're getting 8% real dollars back on your $100,000 invested. So $8,000 a year, right? Net of everything else. And that's a great target place to be in the marketplace today.
Unfortunately, in my area now, things are so hot that people are looking at 5%. So the valuations are going through the roof. We're getting $1,200 per square foot, and it's fueling the mania here. So
and I think you were saying, David, how you invest in, I don't know if you use the word boring markets, but because, obviously Miami is far from, or South Florida is far from boring. So, so you have to go to areas that, yes, more boring, but they sound more stable. And, your cap rate can be 8+ versus, 5%. Craig, you're right. That's not really worth it.
Well, it depends. I mean, if you have a 5% cap rate, but the area's booming, you'll make but exactly. But the hotter the area and the more upside potential, long-term capital appreciation, typically the lower the cap rate, right?
Exactly. So you're right. You have to weigh those two in balance. And again, there's not a right or wrong here. If you're in a hot market, 5% is your target cap rate, and you expect and you see that appreciation, then you can ride that. Again, those are the more volatile markets. That's what we saw, in your area, certainly Craig. It goes hot, and then it drops. So if you know when to kind of get out or get your maximum return, that's good. Or if you're happy with just 5%, as I said before, if you just held on, even when the market drops again, if you hold on, you're still getting that 5%, and you want to ride it back up again, you can do that. Probably not the way I would do it, because I like to exit with my equity when I feel like we are topping out, and go a little bit more liquid. And be ready to come back in when the market drops and buy back in low again. That's kind of how I run it with these 8 to 10 year cycles. Is ride it up and kind of get close to the top. It's never perfect hit. You're never perfect in those things, but get close and harvest some equity. And then I go more liquid, meaning I put my money into lending deals, which I do more lending deals today than I do any equity deals, by probably a factor of probably 5 to 1. I do lending deals because I want to be more liquid. I've got enough equity that rides, but see, I'm ready. I'm poised, because I can turn those note receivables into cash like that, because they're very liquid. Because again, they're generating great cash flow. So there's plenty of people that would take my notes in a heartbeat. Not a bank, but someone else will take them. A private capitalist will take those notes, because they're great notes that got a track record. And when I want cash to go do another opportunity, I can liquidate those notes that are producing 10, 12, 15%. So that's where I park my money when I'm not investing in equities.
Wow, that's smart.
That's great. What a great position to be in. But I mean, look at the beauty of what we're talking about. So if you are in a leveraged deal, but you have, let's say, 30 or 40% LTV, and you got an 8% cap rate, net return, after debt service and all the fees, and your property is increasing, 4 or 5% capital, increasing on the asset yearly, the return on cash is astronomical.
It's huge.
Because you're returning your property may be worth $1 million. You got $300,000 or $400,000 of equity in it, but when it appreciates 5%, it doesn't appreciate 5% on your equity. It appreciates 5% on the value. So it's just a slippery, and then you factor depreciation to it. It's an amazing vehicle.
Well, here's the thing to remember too, and I joke around when I tell people this, but I say equity doesn't taste so good. When you need to eat, you try to eat that equity. It's like cardboard. You spit it out. So you're exactly right. You ride the equity up, and that can be returned as long as you know when and how to harvest it. You want to be able to harvest equity, which is its net worth, right? You want to be able to convert that to cash flow, which is then what you convert to food so you can eat. So I'm being facetious here.
Yeah.
Equity, I'm all about building equity and capital appreciation, amortization of debt, forcing equity by improving a property. I mean, there's so many ways to increase equity, but you want to be able to convert that equity to cash or cash on demand by having the flexibility in the marketplace. So yeah, it's such a fun place to be because you can. It's never perfect, but gosh, real estate, if you do it the right way, it's just really hard to lose. I know a lot of people have lost money, but again, that's just because they didn't know what they didn't know, right? Same thing with anything. We're all going to go down the road and get burned and a few times, but just mitigate your risk, right? Don't go out and shoot for the home runs. I mean, hook up with people that know what they're doing, learn the ropes a little bit, see what it looks like, and then you can decide, is this something I want to be more active in, or should I stay more passive in it? You can choose. That's what's nice about it.
So when is your next, so you have conferences, right?
We do a quarterly mastermind. So that's where, our members come. We are, I'll just give you guys a little bit of foresight because we're about capped off with Freedom Founders Mastermind because I can only deliver high value and the deal flow that we bring is one of the key components. And you guys know if you grow too big, something's going to get diluted. So we are close to capping it off. But what we want to do is we want to do some one-off conferences that would not be just Freedom Founders or just real estate, but bring other great people in that also talk about the other key components of freedom, which we talked about earlier, your practice asset. So that's something that I'll probably come back and look at you guys for at some point and saying, hey, would you guys be interested in doing something if we had the right people, right? If we're bringing the right people in, components, I want some more brain trust. That's why I love doing these podcasts. I get to meet the other brain trusts out there. And if we put some stuff together, it was really cool. We could give solid information to people who aren't ready to jump into a big mastermind or something like that, especially the younger generation. I've got a real heart for the younger generation because, doggone it, look what they're coming out of school today with a debt load hanging on them, and the choices are tough and to get started. And if they just had a little bit more direction, the podcasts are great. What you guys do, that kind of direction's key. And I just love to get that out to more people with all the financial acumen that they need, everything that they can start figuring life out a little bit. So your question was, when do we meet? So yeah, we meet 4 times a year. Sorry about that.
That's your private mastermind community.
That's correct.
Right? So,
yes.
And you just answered it. Is that really you're not open because you don't have any bandwidth to deliver value. So
we're about maxed. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, yeah, I think that, the second part of your answer was good. Yeah, maybe something does need to be created that synergizes with some of the things that Craig and I are, kind of promoting and talking about. So that would be cool.
And full disclosure too, David knows Chuck Blakeman because Peter and I are getting a more deeper connection with Chuck, and you guys, really speak the same language. Of course, a different mechanism. But the same philosophies and principles.
I love Chuck's philosophy. I've had a chance to interview him twice. In fact, he's actually doing our keynote in March. Special invitation to you guys. If you guys would like to come, you come as my guest. I'm serious. I'd love to have you come. But Chuck's going to keynote for us because yes, he speaks to the core of building a business, right? I mean, and Craig, you and Peter are doing alignment with him. So yeah, he's right on track. And again, that's what I'm talking about. There's different components to freedom. I'm really big on the real estate side, but I realize there's these other key pieces that I appreciate so much. And Chuck's model, we've used a great deal of it in Freedom Founders. I mean, not just for our members, but I mean for the Freedom Founders team. We have built a lot of our culture and our pulse based on some of those principles. So I love Chuck. He's dead on.
Where are you guys going to be in March? Where is this?
Dallas.
Oh,
yeah,
awesome.
Dallas, yeah.
And is there any extra room for the people that are listening to this to jump onto that, or?
Really, probably not. I mean, we've got. If someone was really interested, I mean, there is a process they can go through. Screening to see if. And we do have other guests that we invite to come. So I mean, again, I didn't come on your show to promote at all here for Freedom
you on
Founders.
the spot right now, David.
Well,
Sorry.
okay, but you know what? There's probably probably a couple people out there going, man, this sounds really cool. I mean, we do like to talk to those people. So we've got a little bit of room, but we're not bringing in. We can't. We brought in like 16 new people at our meeting and we're just about there. So we've got a little capacity. We don't have much drop off. Our retention rate's really high just because of what we do. So not much room there, but I would encourage people, if you want to jump on the podcast, Dennis Freedom Blueprint podcast, and we do put out a lot of, just free information. We have a Freedom Insider. I love to give stuff out. Look, I'm not all about holding it all in, saying, oh, this is all just secret stuff. Look, that's not the way the world works. I live off of an abundance mindset. You give, and you receive. I want to make a difference out there in the world. I've lived a great life. I've gone through stuff that's been tough. I know what it takes. I know what it's like to be in tough positions in life whether you're younger or mid-career or in a career. I know what it's like. And I just want, through myself, not just myself alone, but through guys like you, other people who have a heart also, is to show our colleagues there is a way out. There is a light at the end of the tunnel, no matter how deep you feel like you're in, how behind the 8 ball you may be. There's a way out, and the best way to do it is find the right people. Jim Rohn said it best. He said you become the average of the people you spend the most time with, and that is a truth. That is a truth. That's why I like hanging with you guys, because you guys up my game. Hopefully I up your game. We all up everybody's game. If we just go into our cave and our practice and just take that John Wayne rugged individualist and say, I'll just crank it out myself, how far do we really get in life? I mean, you just get so far and you're topped out, and as soon as something hits you, you get slammed on the side. Yeah, you're out. You're out of gas. You can't do it by yourself.
Yep, agreed.
It's so true. So true. Good stuff, Peter. Good stuff, David. This is awesome. Awesome.
David, I don't know where you're going in your airplane right now.
It's getting a little bumpy. Turbulence.
You know what, David? I have an earthquake here in Florida.
You have an earthquake in Florida?
Yeah, look at that. It's going crazy over here.
Oh, man. The whole world is shaking up.
Yeah.
I mean, we got turbulence everywhere, don't we? Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy.
But I appreciate you taking the time to come on. I've been honestly this meeting has been on our calendars for a long time, and I've been eagerly awaiting it. So I'm glad to connect with you, and it sounds like we got some stuff to circle up on post call with each other, and that's great. The synergy and the relationships are where it's at, like you said. So
no doubt.
Anyway, I can't thank you enough, brother, for coming on. And Greg,
thanks, bud.
Else in closing?
My pleasure. You guys are great. I'll let you close, Greg, but I'll just kick it back to you and say thank you. I've been looking forward to this for quite a while as well, and I wasn't going to miss this today. Even if I had to travel, I was going to stop, and we're going to make this happen, so we did it.
Cool.
Yeah. Thank you, David, and thanks for what you do for dentistry. And just love not only the real estate message, but the message that freedom is in your own hands, and you don't have to be a victim. I love the idea that the intentionality and the belief that you can control your destiny and not imprisoned by factors, situations, or concepts that are self-limiting. So keep beating on that drum. I'm a big fan, and I appreciate what you do, and look forward to circling back with you.
All right, guys. Thank you. Have a great Thanksgiving.
See you, man. Happy Thanksgiving to you.